Brandeis, where both Jamele and I work, is a small university, a small world unto itself. But it is large enough that someone like me can walk around campus unnoticed. People basically don't know who I am, and I'm very, very happy about that. I imagine that the president of Brandeis is more familiar to our community, but I would bet that even in a small group, he might go unrecognized by many. Not so Jamele Adams. As Dean of Student Life, Jamele is integral to the undergraduate experience at Brandeis and a familiar presence on campus, and he stands out in a crowd. But Jamele's involvement with student life and all things Brandeis extends well beyond his official duties. A spoken word poet, a performance artist, and a leader in the wider world around issues of diversity and inclusion, particularly as they pertain to young adults, Jamele speaks about things that matter more than ever in the topsy-turvy times in which we live. And he does so in a way that connects across generations and communities, and yes, even worlds. One of the topics that Jamele returns to time and again involves the motto, love, inclusion, trust. These three words resonate in important ways for those of us who identify and go out into the world as Unitarian Universalists, who carry the personal and spiritual to other precincts in our lives. The words love, inclusion, trust speak to our 7 principles and 6 sources as surely as we are joined together in this sanctuary. But they also speak to us as we live in a time when division is, to all appearances, sown willfully, even casually among us, to run rampant like an invasive plant species spreading across the landscape. We would do well to reflect on our principles and sources as we listen to Jamele Adams today, and as we contemplate the ways in which the bits and pieces of our lives can come together to make us whole, just as my professional and personal worlds come together here at this moment. Please join me in welcoming Jamele Adams.
Wow. Good morning, everyone. The Reverend Dr. King says, non-cooperation with evil is as moral an obligation as is cooperation with good. I'll say it again. Non-cooperation with evil is as moral an obligation as is cooperation with good. And this right here is good. Let me hear you say this is good. Now, if you would, turn to your neighbor. Some of you still looking at me. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor. Say, neighbor, you are beautiful. And now, your response should be, why, thank you. You're not that bad yourself. No, I'm just Now, turn back to your neighbor again and say, neighbor, we need each other to keep each other free. Now, I'm going to ask you to say it again. Now that you know what I'm going to ask you to say like you mean it. If you mean it. If you don't, then don't say it. And it's okay. Don't be offended by that. But if you do, let's repeat it one more time. Say, neighbor, we need each other to keep each other free. So friends and family, and I say friends and family because when you say ladies and gentlemen, I feel like we leave people out, and I don't want to leave people out, right? We don't want to leave people out, right? So poetry has been this way that I've been able to communicate and live out a form of freedom. And my ability to do that in different forums is a blessing that I cannot express thanks enough for. And then for that poetry to have been an outlet in so many ways for different experiences in my life is what made it such a powerful presence in my life. How it became something, I'll tell you a quick version of this longer story, is that my aunt is a survivor of domestic violence, and in assisting her through that trauma and that terror, I, for the first time, wrote poetry really just to express my feelings, and I was so angry about it. And then from that point on, I continued to write whenever I was angry. But then I used that same energy to write when I was happy. And then when I felt moved and were feeling sorry or sad for someone, I wanted to make impact with my own feelings with other folks. And so poetry just kind of took on this life. Whereas one of my friends ran into my book of poetry that I rarely have out. She ran into it, said, you need to go share this, and then the rest of it is kind of history. And it just led one thing to another. And it's just been a great force in my life. And so I ask that you all take that, whatever that thing is that you love, and use it to reach other people, because you love it and it helps you. There's nothing like you giving the best parts of yourself doing something that you love doing. So I encourage you all to do that. And poetry has always done that for me ever since it found me. I believe that the poems that we share, whether we choose it from a book or whether we write them, the words somehow find us, and we become the conduits of their life, of them living. Even though they're based sometimes on our life experiences, I truly believe that the words just find us in a multitude of ways. And again, this community is fantastic. I definitely want to come to some of the gatherings that have food, because folks want us to come and eat some things. I will also co-sign viewing the film, the documentary, The 13th. It's very powerful, and it has all kinds of informative pieces to it that a lot of folks may not be aware of. The other thing is, you want to read a book that kind of complements that, it would be The Prison Industrial Complex, which it's written by a woman named Angela Davis, who also is an important figure in the film, The 13th, actually. So you get to hear us speak candidly about that very thing. So once again, thank you for having me. Thank you, Jim, for the incredible, I don't even know where Jim went. Right there. Thank you for that incredible introduction. And I just appreciate it. He and I got to meet each other here because we don't see each other on campus enough. So again, thank you very much. All right. One other thing I will share with you all is that I also am a Yankees fan. I worked for Derek Jeter for a little bit. Look at your face. You're so in shock right now. Okay. Hey there, black boy. Hey there, black boy. Hey there, black boy, swinging from the tree. Instead of whips and chains, now they just shoot me. See you next time with bulletproof skin. They figured out a new way to kill us again. Hands up, don't shoot is what we say. I can't breathe, don't kill me that way. My spirit don't die. God loves me. Tell the pearls of the world and newborn babies. Ferguson, Missouri is an epidemic, not a situation. If it's not an epidemic to you, that means it's not affecting you yet. I bet if a group killed countless people, group like you, it would be an epidemic to you. But hold up, stop and frisk this. Around the age when I was old enough to go outside and play by myself, my mother said, boy, when you get stopped by the police, if you get stopped by the police, because they do that sometimes, don't do anything that might get you killed or locked up. In fact, stay in this neighborhood, on this block, in front of this building, so that you're close to home, baby. And that's exactly where these boys are murdered, in their neighborhoods, on their blocks, in front of their buildings, and close to home. This is poverty of a soul, living in a wealth of pain. How do you explain taking the life from an unarmed body? And I don't know what to say, so I begin to act like my name is Michael, Eric, or Oscar, and I lived in Ferguson, Brooklyn, and Oakland, living like them black boys do, dying like them black boys do. And they say 2-5, please don't overreact, because black boys aren't under attack, and that's mostly said by those whom are not black, and I feel like I'm under attack. See, it's hard being human when you started out as property. It's hard being human when you're the anomaly. It's hard being human when you're called minority. Understand, it's hard being human when you learn that once you will consider just 3/5 of one. See us as heartbeats and not target sheets. And this ain't just about black boys or 200 kidnapped girls or condemning all the police in the world. This is about deconstructing systems of oppression, breaking away from the chains, unshackling our brains, and seeing all humans as humane. Turn down for what? This gives us every reason to simply turn up. Let's sacrifice, unlace our eyelashes. Let them flutter to the floor. Catch as much as I can in my eyes so that the dirt never gets in yours. Come on now. Is sacrifice that hard, or is it uncomfortable? Is privilege a right, or is it comfortable? Ferguson, Missouri's deconstruction of the myth that we live in a post-racial consensus. So we either work together or remain separate forever. Not a moment, but a movement. How much death does it take before we see life? They've been murdering black men since Jesus Christ. And the Lord said, Black lives matter. Everybody matters. not just white bodies matter, but when young white bodies get snatched, everything is used to catch those body snatchers, but not kidnappers of black and brown bodies. It's true. Check 1776, 1812, and 1492. When white bodies leap from rules, remember, black and brown bodies fight suicide too. Recognize that darker bodies get abused too, just like white bodies do. But it seems to not matter till it happens to a white body. But any body that's hurt should have some body alert, a body that can assist in the matter. We all matter. When black and brown bodies get hurt, it should hurt white bodies too until those bodies are rescued. All I'm asking is if somebody could remind everybody that nobody is a nobody and that black, brown, and white bodies are all beautiful human bodies.
All lives matter, but one, so do black lives. Why do two phrases that should be working side by side seem only to divide? Two, that's all anyone's saying, black lives matter, too. 11, that's how many times I can't breathe, 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 I can't breathe. Eric Gardner said I can't breathe before he was killed by police. So I guess those three words only mean stop if you're white. 15, that's how old Cameron Sterling was when he lost his father. 15, that's how old Cameron Sterling was when he said, we must protest the right way. 15, that's how old Cameron Sterling was when he said, peace, not guns. 20, so why were 20 officers shot in retaliation when all that separates black and blue is only a few shades? 54. It's been 54 years since the Civil Rights Act passed, and everybody supposedly became equal. Well, guess what? We are in 2018, and films about equality are still part of the fantasy genre. 102. That's how many unarmed black people were killed by police last year. One. One is one more than that number should have been. These words are written by a 14-year-old young man, white young boy from Atlanta, Georgia, named Royce Mann. I can't breathe. The last words of a man on the pavement, a homicide according to the medical examiner, and then there was that news that there would be no indictment. Watching the video of Eric Garner's death, you can still admire police but wonder why they can't admit that they made a tragic mistake. You can still support the justice system and still feel that justice had not been done. I am not a police officer, so I don't know what that life is like. I am not an African-American man, so I don't know what that life is like. But when someone says, I can't breathe, you should let them breathe. And if he dies after saying it, then you should have let him breathe. By coincidence, my friends, I was in New York City that December. I was returning to my hotel room around 9 o'clock at night. I remember it very well. I was driving in a cab on the West Side Highway when all of a sudden all the traffic stopped to slow down and the cabbie stopped, and we realized we were not going anywhere for a while because thousands of protesters were marching up the highway. And there were a lot of police presence, but the police were letting those protesters march right through the cars lined up on the highway. As the protesters made their way towards us, I made sure that the cab doors were locked. I kind of sunk low in the back seat of the cab. You see, I remembered how I had once been in a cab in Caracas, and that cab had been caught up in a large political protest during an election time in Venezuela, and the protesters had randomly chosen a few cars to start rocking, and they chose our car, and then they started lighting some of the cars on fire. So I was afraid that night in New York, my friends. Here I was sitting in this New York City cab in the dark of night with hundreds of protesters coming towards me. And I took a few deep breaths to calm myself. And then I looked out the window of the cab. And I saw the faces of the protesters. Then I even rolled down the window just a little bit. And I looked deeper into their faces. And I saw there was passion and there was sadness and despair and disappointment, but they were all moving together, orderly and respectful of those of us in the parked cars. And there were black men and black women and white men and white women and young people and old people. And I finally got the courage to reach out my hand and touched one of them. And they shook my hand back in solidarity. And my eyes filled with tears. And my cabbie turned to me and said, lady, are you scared? And I said, no. All of a sudden, I am really filled with hope. I'm filled with hope. And even now, Jamele, I'm filled with hope.
Whoo. Let me hear you say, whoo. Reverend Cullen, you preaching this morning. Don't you agree? If you've been moved a little bit this morning so far, clap your hands if you've been moved just a little bit. She's preaching. You are preaching this morning. I don't know if this is her regularly, but she's preaching this morning. Thank you for preaching. Say thank you. Thank you. We're going to keep preaching. Can we keep preaching? A little bit, talking to each other? Let me say, my voice is important. My voice is important. One of the most dangerous sounds on earth is shh. Every time you hear it, there is secrecy, danger, or the silencing of someone. Shh, be quiet. Shh, don't tell. The giver of the sound oftentimes is hiding something. Shh, that won't hurt. Shh, shut the door, shut the door. Shh, if you make another sound. I can't ever recall hearing it and feeling relieved. Like I've never heard, shh, you may wear your hair here however you wish. Or, shh, women, you will begin to get paid equally starting now. Shh, breathe, boy. That gun ain't pointed at you. It's pointed at that slavery behind you. Shh, that's the Savior. Shh, they're impeaching the president, whichever one you want it to be. Shh, those pipelines won't go there. Those colored graves are sacred. Shh, there is no box to check. We're all human. Shh, is gender assignment always necessary? Shh, can be so maddening. I remember, shh, put your hands up, turn around, place them on the hood of the car. I remember hearing the teacher say, shh, stop acting like that, and feeling like she was saying, stop acting so black. Remember the first time you heard, shh? Remember the first time you said, shh? You ever shushed a dead body? You ever knew too much that they ask you to shush? Knowledge can be so loud. They shh you in the library. You ever shushed a soul? You ever been silenced, interrupted, made quiet, shh, soundless, shh, made not important, made what you say not to matter, shh, sonically hung? The hate is so loud. We begin to shh all of the love. Shh, life. Shh, the Lord. Shh, and become still. I ask you to remember your voice. Your voice. And never be silenced again.
Just a few weeks ago, we had the most amazing Christmas Eve service here in this place. Candlelit, it was beautiful. Place was filled with members and friends, some of whom we do only see at Christmas time and maybe again at Easter. C&E friends, we call them, but that's okay. And we like seeing them and hope that someday we'll begin to see a little more of them. But who am I to complain? My own adult kids and their families don't tend to join us here on Christmas Eve. And in fact, I host my family's Christmas Eve party across the street at the parsonage. And truth be told, the party's well underway by the time I get over there after Christmas Eve service every year. But that's okay. I had a real surprise this Christmas Eve. At the end of the service, I was greeting folks at the back door, and I spotted 3 members of my family, my brother, his wife, and their teenage son. And wow, it was so good to see them. And I gave them each a big hug. And as I was hugging my nephew, he kind of looked around a bit, and I could tell he was a little bit uncomfortable. Lots of folks were kind of aware that he was there. And he was probably very aware that he and his mom, my sister-in-law, were the only black folks in the church that night. Hundreds and hundreds of people, and only these 2. And I kind of wanted to hug my nephew a little tighter and say, it's okay. But teenage boys don't allow hugging from their aunties. I worry about my nephew. I worry about him a lot. For a long time, he attended a little charter school in Lexington, and my brother and sister-in-law would drive him back and forth each day from their home in Jamaica Plain, just to keep him in this sweet little bubble of a school. Lots of diversity in the school, lots of private attention. But last fall, they had to move, and they chose to move to Framingham so my nephew could be near his best friend. But even though he's attending school with his friend, my nephew is attending Framingham High School, a typical rough and tumble urban school, and frankly, I'm scared. When I think of Dr. King, I think of the civil rights movement and the struggle of African Americans in the 50s and the 60s, and that struggle to achieve equality of rights, like equal opportunity in employment and housing and education, the right to vote, the right to free access to public facilities, the right to simply be free of racial discrimination. I was a lawyer before I was a minister, and I have, over the years of my legal career, been quite encouraged by the guarantees of the legal decisions that we have made in our country. And there have been legal rights established. And then America elected her first black president, and I thought, wow, between the legal system and electing a black president, our racial struggles are over. And now it's obvious that the civil rights movement may have changed a bunch of laws, but it didn't change enough hearts. And now it appears that President Obama's election was a Band-Aid, and after he left office, the Band-Aid was removed, and the white pus of white supremacy and white bigotry have been kind of oozing over this country, oozing all over the place. Given the tragic events in Baltimore, New York, Charleston, Ferguson, loads of other places in the USA, we know that the time is now to look deeply and act compassionately, to finally address our country's deep-rooted structural racism. And one of the primary questions we in this room, as white people, one of the primary questions we ask is, how can we help? I remember these words by a woman named Lila Watson. If you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you recognize that your liberation and mine are bound up together, then we can walk together. My friends, my observations thus far are these. To be a white ally, it takes a whole lot of listening, a whole lot of asking questions, a whole lot of learning. Jamele, I can never know what it's like to be a black man in America, and I can never know what it's like to be a teenage boy in America like my nephew is, black teenage boy. But I'm hoping over the next few months to do the only thing that I really can do is to try to learn how to be a better ally. That's my business, and I plan to be about doing it. And I'll be thinking of you and my nephew all along the way.
Whoo! Again. Gotta take a breath after that. Go ahead, show some more love. Show some love for you. Yes. Yes, I love this. This is just building on the energy. This is great. We're breaking microphones. It's too powerful. It's palpable. The Reverend Dr. King says, someone must have enough sense in this world to meet physical force with soul force and to meet hate with love. He also says it's better to have a scarred body than a scarred soul. And this is what we're about. And I wanted to share with the gentleman that does the work with the homeless folks. I offered myself to help out with you to do some things, and we were talking about maybe doing a poetry night or something like that, wherever that is, and making that happen, because we've done some of that before. And also doing some work in correction facilities as well, and this has been really powerful. So I'm happy to exchange information, and we can work together on some things. With that, if you're able to and you would, ask everyone to please rise one time if you would. And as I came in, I was greeted with warmth. I parked, I got out the car. Gentleman walks up to me and says, "Hey, we're looking forward to seeing you." I was like, "Oh, this is awesome. How does he know who I am?" I was like, maybe, it's because I'm the black guy. But then I walked in the church and I saw there's my photo right there as soon as you walk in. So it's been there probably for a little while. I don't know, where you at, the gentleman that walked me in? Where are you at? There you go, right there. Thank you. So show some love, show some love. He said, "I'll walk you on in." So he walked me in and brought me to Reverend Cullen. Then I got the other surprise and saw Jim there. So it's just been wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Then I came in and met Sorry thought I was clairvoyant because he had on the tag. And said, "How did you know my name?" I was just reading the tag. I just read the tag. So, but I say all this to say clearly this is a family. And I've been welcomed into your family from the moment I stepped out of the car and saw the first person that my eyes laid upon, other folks. And I appreciate the warmth and the generosity of your energy, your attention, your love, your blessings onto each other. And with that, I ask us to repeat after me. This is something I've created called the Pledge of We, and it's about all of us. And so repeat after me. Say, "We are committed to we." A little bit more than that. We are committed to we. Unapologetic for who we are. We are the future.
We are the future.
Driven by love.
Driven by love.
And a passion. For solidarity in the human family. It is frustrating. When lives are not valued. Therefore, we must never sever. Our efforts. For peace and equality. Now, if you would, if the person next to you is okay with it, give them a set of double high fives. Give them a set of double high fives. Thank you very much.
Let's rise up. Let's rise up with those overlooked and undervalued by society. The black man who walks down the street on his way to his job. It's his first day as an 8th grade English teacher. The same black man who has a son, his most prized possession, who told that son that life would be hard, but anything is possible. The black man who walks down the street on the way to his job only to pass a woman clutching her purse a little too tightly. Let's rise up. Let's rise up with a boy who was a girl that didn't know what he was and now is a boy with parents who loved their daughter but disowned their son. Let's rise up. Let's rise up with a Muslim woman who works for the Justice Department only to experience injustice every time she wears her hijab. Let's rise up and lend a hand to the boy who can't. The boy who sits in a wheelchair watching the other kids play basketball. The boy who becomes the only one in the classroom to win an Olympic gold medal. Let's rise up with the woman who was born in the USA, whose parents are Dominican, whose son's an all-American. Why is she repeatedly told to go back to Mexico? Let's rise up. Let's rise up with the poor white boy, the one who's told he's privileged, but he doesn't feel that way. And yes, this boy does exist. The boy who talks about the pool his family doesn't have, wears the shoes his mom can't afford. He's been given everything, right? So it must be his fault, right? Wrong. Because as someone said, life can be hard if you're white, but life will never be hard because you're white. Let's rise up. Let's rise up with the young Native American poet. She is so filled with wisdom, but no one will listen. The poet who should be in this pulpit, the poet who instead has to hear a white woman speak for her. Let's rise up. Once we do rise up, that glass ceiling will be in reach, and trust me, it is breakable. Once we do, we'll be able to see over any wall, no matter who pays for it. Once we do, the sky will truly be the limit. Scratch that, there will be no limit. Martin had a dream when it was time to dream. Rosa sat when it was time to sit. Barack ran when it was time to run. Now is the time to rise. Rise up, my friends. Rise in body or spirit. Rise up and let's sing. Rise up. From our lips to God's ears, thank you so much, Jamele, for all that you've given us here today. Thanks very much. So we'll enjoy our postlude, and then we'll greet you at the door, and Jamele will be in coffee hour with us. My friends, until we meet again, may you be blessed. Now go be a blessing to the world. Again, may you be blessed. Now go be a blessing to the world.